Hey there, folks. Welcome to the show. Glad you could join me once again for one of these things. Hello to everybody in the live chat. So, um, just a reminder. Yeah, I see. I click over to the live chat window, and I see Dana going TikTok Shives. Um, As usual, as pretty much always, I will be answering questions submitted ahead of time by my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you have something for me in the live chat that you want me to pay attention to, please do hold on to it until I have gotten through all of the questions from patrons and members. And then I will turn my full attention for the rest of the show to the live chat. And I will talk about whatever you want to talk about and answer whatever questions you have in the live chat. So, here we go with the questions from patrons and members. And the first one of those is from Matt, who says, so random question. Do you have any guilty pleasure TV shows you enjoy? I love The People's Court and watching old Bob Ross videos. The latter helps me sleep, and I also watch meditation and ASMR videos. I don't know if I would call Bob Ross a guilty pleasure. I think Bob Ross for me is a completely non-guilty pleasure. But I do share an appreciation for Bob Ross's show. Yeah, I mean, I've watched it since he was still making them. I watched it since when I was, a kid and a teenager when he was still doing new episodes because he had not yet died. So yeah. But as far as guilty pleasures for me, it would probably be like trashy daytime like talk shows and trashy reality shows, which I don't watch very often, but infrequently. If I feel like some televisual junk food, I might put on like an episode of Dr. Phil or an episode of Judge Judy, something like that. Or years ago it was I got into a period where I was watching the show Hoarders, which is a terrible show. I mean, it's one of those shows that it's like, hey, let's gawk at the mentally ill person. Let's gawk at the poor person who's in a bad situation. Let's all gather around and watch the freak, right? It's like a freak show. And it exploits mental illness and it exploits impoverished people and it's awful. It's just awful. But I watched it religiously for for a while. It was fascinating in the worst way and gave me some insight into why shows like that are so popular, because there is like an undeniable train wreck quality to them. And the same thing with Dr. Phil, right? It's the same sort of thing. It's exploitative, it's low and trashy and just it's terrible, and says very bad things about our culture that it A exists and B has been so popular for so long. But I can't deny that I do see the appeal from, from just a purely, voyeuristic perspective. So that would be, again, I don't watch it very often, but every once in a while I find myself, slipping off the wagon and watching like something like that. So those shows like that would be my guilty pleasure. Oasis. So recently I rewatched your video, Does Star Trek Actually Want Us to Fear Technology? And the episode Worst Case Scenario from Star Trek Voyager was actually a pretty convincing story about the potential dangers of machine learning, how bad actors can take its concepts and use them to really bad ends. For those who don't know, the basic summary is a Maquis insurrection program created by Tuvok went awry when he and Tom Paris discover Seska tampered with it. The implication being that she did it before she left to join the Kazon. And every time the crew tried to help the two escape, the Seska program would update itself to put the program back on track to kill them. So yeah, no question. Just wanted to note that. Goddamn, Seska was evil. Hats off to Martha Hackett. Oh, yes. Martha Hackett was terrific. And Seska was, I mean, if Seska had not been so centered on Chakotay, and if they had not done such a poor job with writing Chakotay and making him an interesting character, and if the people she defected to, the Kazon, were a more compelling group of people, then I think that whole storyline could have been terrific. I mean, it was not Seska slash Martha's fault that for me it falls completely flat. It's the fact that like there was this one element that kind of sparked a little bit, which was her. Um, and her being an actor doing the best she could with whatever material she had, and all of the supporting parts that were supposed to create a context in which her character could be interesting just weren't there. It was, a classic case of Voyager's mediocrity failing to support the few times when they did manage to come up with something that had some potential. So, but yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. And I never really thought about it in terms of machine learning, but that's an interesting angle to take. I at some point, I'd have no idea when or how soon. It's not on the schedule at this point, but I will get around to reviewing worst case scenario for my retro reviews. And it'll be interesting to watch it with fresh eyes, having that insight from your question. So thanks for that. Kearley keeping it together. My beautiful fur baby, Coffee, died in a road accident on Saturday. And there's a photo of Coffee that I'll show in a second. She was very small when born, but with lots of love, she became my constant companion and my best friend while working from home. She knew when I was sad and would cheer me up by doing something silly. Please, Steve, for the love of Coffee, can you do something silly to cheer me up? Well, first, let's take a look at Coffee. Here's the kitty cat. I'm sure she is dearly missed. She looks like a wonderful cat. She actually reminds me a little bit of a stray cat that I knew years ago that my now ex-wife and I befriended. A cat that lived on the streets of Sharpsburg, and we nicknamed him Catberg. And he was just the sweetest thing. And then he kind of disappeared after a while, and hopefully it's because somebody noticed how sweet he was and adopted him, but we really don't know. But yeah, so rest in peace, Coffee. I know you're very, very missed, and you look like you were an awesome cat. As for doing something silly, it's funny. I went to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 last week, actually a week ago today. And when I went and sat down in the movie theater, I just happened to look to my left, and in the seat next to me was a cat. And I was shocked, of course, and not sure what to do. And I actually said out loud, "Why is a cat going to see a Guardians of the Galaxy movie?" And the cat said, "Well, I was always a fan of the comic." Condolences, Kearley. Or Kier, excuse me. Condolences, Kearley, keeping it together. Condolences, Kier. It is Teacher Appreciation Week, motherfuckers. This is some random geek, by the way. Steve, North Carolina is working to pass HB 237, the hoodie and mask bill. If someone commits a crime while wearing a hoodie or a mask and they are found guilty of said crime, their punishment will be more severe. This will clearly lead to racially biased enforcement, and 21 Democrats voted for it. I know why you and other liberals will say we should still vote for Democrats come November, but after this, Biden compromising with fascists on trans athletes, Biden forcing railroad workers to get back to work, just to name a few examples, it's understandable why folks are reluctant to vote. As Sophie from Mars says, all further elections until the end of the current order will be between the fascists and the not quite fascists. The not is pretty weak, though. I'm sure you don't see it this way, or yeah, but we have no other option. Maybe change has to come from outside of the system and not within, because we can't rely on the Dems to oppose systemic oppression. Or do you? I don't think the Democratic Party as a whole opposes systemic oppression as stridently or as much as it should. I mean, I agree with you there, but yes, I also think, first of all, I don't think it's fair to call the Democrats fascists. The Democratic Party is a disappointment and a source of incredible frustration in many, many ways, but I would not say that they rise to the level of being fascists. Now, are they fighting fascism as much as they need to be? No. Are they as do they have the level of recognition that of the degree of fascist that the Republican Party has become that I think they need to have? No, they don't. But are they themselves fascists? No, I don't think that's fair to say. But yeah, I mean, I would also say not that we don't have any other option, but there's no other realistic option at this moment. There's no other option. There is no other party that has a realistic shot of depriving political power from Republicans. But no, your criticisms of them not being there strongly enough or often enough against systemic oppression are completely right on. I share them. Michael Ridra, why are fans of geeky franchises prone to becoming such joyless, pedantic, elitist nitpickers? I'm not saying it is the majority of fans. I'm even fine with nitpicking in good fun. I'll happily dive into a diegetic discussion about why the Gorn look different now. But I'm so tired of, well, actually, Strange New Worlds is bad because the Gorn look different. And also here's some lines of dialogue from some episode that aired 60 fucking years ago that contradict what happened in Strange New Worlds. So clearly the writers aren't real Trekkers. Or the D&D movie is bad because the druid used wild shape so many times in one encounter that she'd have to be a 19th level archdruid. And also she shouldn't be able to transform into an owlbear at all and blah fucking blah. The writers aren't real D&Ders. I honestly feel so much secondhand embarrassment when I see this shit. Enjoy or dislike what you want, but what's the appeal of sticking with a franchise just to be an obnoxious wet blanket about it? Why are nerds like this? The theory that I have heard that attempts to explain it that seems the most plausible to me is that it is a way of trying to validate all of the otherwise useless and meaningless trivia that their heads are filled with. When you have devoted your life to the exclusion of many other things to a particular fandom, and you have memorized everything about it, you know the answer to all the trivia questions, you know what happened in, I can pick a random episode of Star Trek and you would be able to tell me everything that happened in it and everything that happened in it that was referenced later on, or everything that happened in it that was a reference to something that happened in a previous episode. This is all fascinating trivia, but it doesn't really mean anything. But by sort of appointing themselves gatekeepers of the fandom and by claiming the right to decide who is a true fan and who isn't, and when there are new entries in the franchise, giving themselves the right to judge what is authentic and what isn't, and what should be considered valid and what shouldn't. It's a way of taking all that useless trivia that they've accumulated from devoting their life to this thing and making it seem like it's worth something, making it seem like it gives them some power or some skill. When outside of that bubble, it doesn't. It means nothing. It just means that you've watched a lot of TV or a lot of movies or played a lot of games and you have a good memory. Like, that's what it means. And it's not necessarily anything to be ashamed of, but it's nothing necessarily to be proud of either. It doesn't really mean anything apart from hopefully the enjoyment that it gives you as a fan. And yeah, your point is well taken. If it doesn't give you that enjoyment as a fan, like if you no longer get any pleasure from it and you're just kind of this joyless gatekeeper who's fussing at people, either fussing at other fans because they're not doing it right, or in the height of arrogance, in the height of entitlement, fussing at the people who are making the thing and telling them that they're not doing it right. you know, you have to wonder, like, what is the point of this? Like, what could you possibly be getting out of it? I suppose they could be getting like a sense of superiority to other people because they think that they're better than those who like different things or engage with it in a different way. But that's a really, really, really thin form of superiority. Like that's just it's erected on a very flimsy foundation. So yeah, I don't know. But that is my that is the theory that I have heard that sounds the most plausible to me, that it's a way of trying to turn all that useless knowledge in their head into something that makes them feel important. John, the only real communist, trademark. On a scale of broke your leg and don't have medical insurance to enslaved in a Beyonce sweatshop in Bengal, how much does it suck to live under capitalism? A lot. A lot. Although I did just see on Twitter, there's a guy, I don't follow him, but somebody I do follow retweeted him, and apparently he's been in a dispute with his landlord because his landlord um, promised to remove a tree that was on the property and even admitted in writing 6 months ago that the tree on the property in question was a safety hazard and should be removed. But then the landlord never removed it. And just recently, the tree finally fell over and it landed on this guy's car. And the key piece of information I haven't told you yet is the guy whose car it landed on is a lawyer. So sometimes capitalism is a little funny, you know, every once in a while. It gives you reason for a giggle. But overall, no, not there may well be a better system that we could be trying out. General Contact Unit problem child. The governor of Montana signed an anti-trans bill, even though he has a non-binary son who publicly pleaded with him not to. Ted Cruz is still pushing for there to be no legal restrictions on conversion therapy, even though his own teenage daughter is bi. There are other examples of GOP politicians who are continuing to persecute queer people despite having queer kids themselves. And recently, I've been wondering what's going on in their heads. Like, do you think they are just sociopathic monsters who are willing to risk their own children's safety for political power? Or do you think they naively believe they'll always be able to use their influence to protect their own queer kids, no matter how bad things get for all the other queer people in the country? P.S. Unlimited Lives is a newish progressive Star Trek YouTuber I've been really enjoying the last several months, and I'd like to recommend them to anyone who enjoys your Star Trek content. And it's youtube.com/unlimited_lives. So if anybody, I have not watched them, I'm not familiar with them, but if you want to check them out, there you go. Unlimited Lives here on YouTube, Star Trek YouTuber. I think part of it is that, yeah, they always sort of assume that they and their people, their family, are untouchable. And so they don't really see it in those terms. They don't see it as though they're inflicting suffering on their own kids because they assume their kids are going to be fine because they're their kids. And also I think it's a lack of empathy, whether it's through themselves or through their kids. Like, yeah, you would like to think, and a lot of times people say, well, if these politicians, if they only knew more trans people, or if they had trans kids, or if they had trans relatives or friends or whatever, then they wouldn't think the way they do. They would see that would humanize trans people to them, and they would see them as human beings, not as people to be persecuted and exploited and denigrated and erased. And maybe in certain cases that's true. But have we not seen enough evidence over the last few years to tell us that that is not always the case? And in fact, that is frequently not the case. Look at all of the examples on social media of conservative politicians and conservative pundits and celebrities who just obviously have no empathy and don't seem even capable of empathy with people unlike themselves, even when they can talk about how they were in the same situation. Like, wasn't it, who is it? Was it Craig T. Nelson, the guy who played Coach? Craig T. Nelson, who is apparently a conservative, who said, you know, when I was younger, I was on welfare and nobody helped me out. I mean, just think about that sentence for a second. And he said, I'm sure he meant it. I'm sure he didn't see anything unusual about that. When I was younger, I was on welfare, but nobody helped me out. So when that's the mindset, like how can you possibly reach that? Like, how can you reach that person and say, wait a minute, like, you're decrying people as wanting quote unquote handouts for, you know, making use of a welfare program that exists to help people in their situation. But you're saying, well, I was in that situation and I even was on welfare, but nobody helped me out. So, you know, it makes perfect sense to me that a Republican politician could have a queer child and not see anything wrong with enacting laws that will punish and brutalize queer people. They're incapable of that very basic insight. Maybe that's why they're conservatives. Maybe that's what allows them to be conservatives. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're all sociopaths. I don't know. I think that's a little extreme, but they are certainly lacking empathy and lacking that particular insight. And I see evidence of that all over the place. Jason M. Hey, Steve, this past week I have rewatched Strange New Worlds in anticipation of season 2 and also rewatching your reviews of the episodes. Great work, by the way. I can see the sheer enjoyment you are having build after each review. Rewatching this has got me thinking. I have a list of shows and movies I go back to watching on my feelings, based on my feelings or moods. Like wanting to watch emotional war pieces, I watch We Were Soldiers, The Patriot. Wow, 2 Mel Gibson movies from a person that should not be liked. But anyway, Master and Commander. I'm seeing a theme. TNG, DS9, and even Voyager for some classic Trek fix, etc. My question is, what are some of your go-to movies or shows which you rewatch regardless of how many times seen, and some of the motivation for your picks? Well, I mean, some of it there are clear motivations. Like sometimes I'm feeling nostalgic. I'm feeling like I want to, you know, get in touch with my childhood, so I'll watch He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I have all of that on DVD and I can pop that in whenever I want. You know, sometimes I want to remember, a lot of it is touching back to times in my life. You know, I want to remember when I was a teenager. So I'll watch, like, you know, a Tarantino movie because I discovered Tarantino when I was a teenager, or I'll watch a Kevin Smith movie because I think I was 14 when Clerks came out or something like that. But often it's not really, I don't think it's at least it's not consciously motivated by anything other than I want to watch that movie again. Like I think I've mentioned before the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner and Alan Rickman as the sheriff. Like, I mean, I can watch that at the drop of a hat. Like I could watch that movie right now. I never get tired of it. I've seen it so many times. I never get tired of it. Star Trek to a certain extent. I think TNG probably more than the others. And I mean, TNG is not my favorite Star Trek show. I would still say Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek show. But when I'm just in the mood to sit on the couch and watch something, and I don't particularly care what it is, I just want to watch something that I know I will enjoy and will entertain me for an hour or so. And I feel like that thing is Star Trek, then it's usually TNG that I throw on. So yeah, I mean, things like that. They're not always tied to a particular motivation, but those are a few of the examples of things like that. Yeah. Isaiah Taylor. So Steve, let me pick your philosophical brain for a minute. So recall a couple of months ago when I brought up the conversation of AI and the metaverse. Okay, here's the question. Suppose you are an avid fan of the singer Billie Eilish, but you have paralyzing social anxiety that prevents you from attending a gathering with a bunch of people. You then hear about a newly released artificial intelligence technology that lets one recreate real life events through a VR headset. It has augmented features like Pokemon Go of times past. You can access this technology from your home where it is just you and you alone. You buy the device, which is $260, and give it a try. Your bedroom then transforms from a bland beige bore to a vibrant palette of colors as Eilish appears on screen in her baggy attire projected on the far front wall. Question: would this be a copyright issue? Would Billie Eilish get a cut from this? Or could this become a Napster situation? 1,000 limit 1,000 limit reached. Thoughts? I guess it depends on where the Billie Eilish content is coming from. I mean, if that device exists and it is a viable technology and Billie Eilish or her record company or whoever created or licensed this product to exist where it could be experienced in like a virtual environment, then I presume Billie Eilish would get a cut from it. But I assume it also could be a pirated thing. And I guess then it would be up to you as the individual consumer whether you were okay with that. I guess, I mean, it really depends on the situation. It depends on the specifics. Do you get do you pay full price for your Billie Eilish VR content, or do you download it from something, or do you get it from, someone selling it off the back of a truck, so to speak? I guess it depends on the situation. If the technology were viable and was considered a good investment, then it could presumably be like a legitimate thing that the artist would get a percentage of, but maybe not. It's not so much a philosophical question as it is just a question of, the availability of the product and where you got it from, and again, I guess the philosophical component would be, if it is a Napster situation, as you say, that takes me back. If it is a Napster situation and you didn't pay anything for it, and Billie Eilish is not getting a cut of it when you watch it or when you acquire it, then the question is, how do you feel about that? Are you okay with that, or do you feel guilty about it? And that's really a question for you to answer, David Colby, I had another question, but I edited it because, unlike Steve, I can restrain being pointlessly mean and petty about a show a friend likes. Wait, shit. Just saying that's mean and petty. Oh no, I've been hoisted by my own Picard. Nicely played. Anyway, question, right? I've been playing Myst. Did you ever play Myst? Or the sequel to Myst? Riven? The sequel to Myst? I never played Myst. I remember when Myst was a hugely popular game when I was, I guess, either toward the end of middle school or early in high school. I can't quite remember what year Myst was like the huge game, but I remember well that Myst was like the huge game for a while. I never played it. I played Phantasmagoria. Remember that? Did anybody ever play Phantasmagoria back in the 90s? I never played Myst, but I played Phantasmagoria, which was, as you might imagine, a horror game with some video elements back when that was a big, like, full motion video elements worked into the game. And from the impression I get is that it was kind of Myst-like in terms of gameplay and mood and such. But I don't know because I never played Myst. I was a Phantasmagoria man. Yeah, and I think I only actually played it to the end once. I think I did complete it, but it took a long time, and I completed it, and I was like, oh, all right, cool, I did that. So yeah, but no, I never played Myst, and nor did I ever play Riven, the sequel to Myst. Agent Meister, if you have not read this message and don't want to know what happens in it, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. Are you ripping me off in your questions now? Is that where we're at in our relationship? You think what? Because you're a supporter that you can just rip off my shit in your questions? You think that's cute? You think that's funny? It is actually kind of funny. I appreciate it. Pelder Joy, mon capitan. As you may have guessed, I've been enjoying your Star Trek retro reviews. They're always very thoughtful and articulate, and you highlight elements of these episodes that I may not have missed or didn't miss, but appreciate all the more for your review, such as Q bouncing the ball or the wobbling chair. You've made no secret of your disdain for the fantasy genre, with the exception of The Princess Bride, which I think you've said you have a fondness for. You do like this movie, right? I do. I watch The Princess Bride every couple of years and do so with the same enjoyment I've had with my first viewing when I was 10. I would love to hear your thoughts on this movie. Obviously, not a full length review, unless you want to, of course. But if you could spend a couple of minutes talking about it with the same deftness you do with your retro reviews, I would really appreciate it. It might help me find something else to love about it. If you agree to do this, please reply with, as you wish. As you wish, I will do the best I can from memory. It's been a while since I watched The Princess Bride, and one of the tricks to doing those Star Trek retro reviews is I always watch the episode right before I start writing the review. So I have not watched The Princess Bride anytime recently, so I'm just going from memory here. But I think the thing that I like the most about it, and the thing that makes it one of the relatively few exceptions to my not enjoying high fantasy stuff, is that it's really funny. And funny gets you a long way with me. I watch The Princess Bride, and I'm not necessarily watching it and going, oh, it's high fantasy. They're doing fairy tale stuff. It's swords and sorcerers and castles and all the stuff that I usually roll my eyes at. It's funny. It's got great jokes. It's got funny characters. It's got great actors giving amazing comedic performances. Like, it's just a really smart, clever, charming, funny movie. And that's the impression that it leaves with me. And when I think about it from memory, all of my memorable scenes from it are funny scenes. Like Inigo Montoya saying, "There's something you should know about me. I am not left-handed," and then he switches hands, and then the Dread Pirate Roberts is like, "I'm not left-handed either," and he switches hands. And it's just, I mean, there are a couple of memorable moments that are not funny. Again, it's in Inigo Montoya, like when he finally confronts the six-fingered man, and he keeps saying, "My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." And then finally he disarms him. And, the guy says, "I'll give you anything you want." And he says, "I want my father back, you son of a bitch." And he stabs him. Like, that's a great moment. But the reason that's a great moment for me, and the reason why that feels like an earned moment, is because I'm totally on Inigo's side. I am completely in love with him as a character. And the main reason why I'm in love with him as a character is because he has been so goddamn funny. He has made me laugh so many times in the movie up to this point. I'm completely on his side. So when he finally finds the guy who kills his father and gets to kill him back, I'm like, yeah. And I think maybe that's an element of comedy, especially comedy employed in like a narrative, because The Princess Bride it wants you to get invested in the story. It's not just set up, payoff, set up, punchline, set up, punchline, set up, punchline. It's not like it's not a spoof like Airplane or something where the main idea is to get you to laugh. It's telling a story, and you're supposed to laugh, but you're also supposed to be invested in the story. And comedy, good comedy that works and makes you laugh, employed in a story that you are also supposed to get invested in, helps you to get more invested in the story. Because if these characters are making you laugh, that makes you feel good about them. It makes you like them. It makes you feel attached to them. Because who doesn't like, say, in real life? If there's someone you know and you think they're funny and they're always making you laugh, you probably like that person. That's probably one of your favorite people. And I think it can work in a similar way when you're watching a film. If there's a character that you think is funny and they're one of the good guys and they're always making you laugh, and then there's this goal that they have to achieve, or there's this conflict that they have to survive, you're pulling for them. You're completely on their side. And one of the reasons is they make you laugh. And so you like them. So I think that's it. Really, it's not just a funny movie. The fact that the humor works so well helps me, at least, to get more invested in the story and to care about what happens to these characters that I like so much because they make me laugh. So yeah. Anyway, that's just off the top of my head. If I actually sat down and rewatched the movie and then wrote a review right after that, I would probably have other things to say. But hopefully that will do. And thank you for the question. And thank you for watching my retro reviews and saying nice things. Keith Parker. Hey, Steve, I started following your channel during COVID. I love lots of your videos, but my favorites are the ones about Star Trek. And while I am sure you've answered this question dozens of times, I've never heard you tell us what your favorite TOS episodes are. I think the best episode they ever did was City on the Edge of Forever, but my favorites are The Cage and Doomsday Machine. The latter is probably not surprising, but a lot of folks are surprised by how much I love The Cage. After all, it's often only given 3 to 3.5 stars. For me, though, it is like an extension of sci-fi classics such as Forbidden Planet. To steal from another great show, The Cage evokes awe and mystery, at least for me. So what are your favorite TOS episodes, and which is the best if they're not the same? Take care. Oh boy, well, I already reviewed one of them in my first batch of retro reviews, or my second batch of retro reviews. The first batch was about the first episodes of every show, and then the second batch was about my personal favorites. And I reviewed my favorite TOS episode, which is Amok Time, the season 2 premiere, which is the one where Spock gets the Vulcan fuck fever, and he's so horny that he has to go to Vulcan and have sex or he'll die, except it turns out he can either have sex or get in a fight. And if sex doesn't cure him of the fever, then violence will, which I think is a really positive message for all the viewers at home. That slightly problematic element aside, I think it's a fantastic episode. Amok Time is my favorite TOS episode. I mean, I also love Doomsday Machine. I also love City on the Edge of Forever. I can't honestly say I love The Cage, but I think The Cage is good. Like, I can see how if The Cage had wound up being the actual template for the show, it probably would have been an enjoyable late 60s sci-fi action adventure show. I don't know if it would have quite been the iconic franchise that it eventually grew into, but The Cage is a good episode. And I definitely agree with you about the Forbidden Planet connection. There's a lot of Forbidden Planet in Star Trek all throughout the original series, but it's especially evident in The Cage. So I'm totally with you there. I also really like, let me see, what are some, oh, I mean, I think did I say already City on the Edge of Forever? Yeah, City on the Edge of Forever is fantastic. Devil in the Dark is fantastic. I've always had a soft spot for Charlie X. I love The Trouble with Tribbles. There are so many great classic Star Trek episodes. There are too many for me to think of right now, but I love classic Star Trek. But I think my very favorite is Amok Time. Wolfie Basach, 4 days previously. It's nighttime, and my worried self lays back in bed and allows a troubled darkness to enter my mind. Soon, a voice from the void speaks out. We are one, it says. I am your inner self. Evening, inner self, I say. I'm concerned. We are one, comes the reply. Tell me of your concern. I have a task, but I'm afraid, I say. We are one. Speak of this task you fear, demands inner me. Well, I say hesitantly, I've got an ask-away question, but it involves admitting to Steve that my favorite version of Star Trek is Voyager. Fuck all that, booms inner self. Don't drag me into this shit. You're on your own, son. And so, back to the present day. Hi, Steve. Although Voyager is my favorite of all Treks, I was always hugely pissed off at the way it defanged the Borg. And so my question is, as you're a DS9 fan, is there anything that pisses you off about that show? By the way, a vacancy for new inner self is available on all the usual job sites. Yeah, I'll tell you what pisses me off about DS9, how comes fucking Loxana Troy is always showing up. That's what pisses me off about DS9. Yeah, I mean, I as a show, like looking at it on the whole, there's really very little about Deep Space Nine that I can say, like, when I think about it or I watch it, it makes me roll my eyes and go, oh God, why'd they have to do that? Making Lwaxana Troi a recurring character on Deep Space Nine, where she has absolutely no fucking reason to be, really, really gets on my nerves. I don't think any of her episodes on that show are remotely good. I don't think. I think she's a horrible character to begin with. I think I've said before, I like exactly one of her episodes, and it's Half a Life from TNG. Um, every other episode she's ever been in is fucking garbage, and all of her DS9 episodes are fucking garbage, and they're the only DS9 episodes that I will regularly skip. Like if I'm doing a watch, a rewatch or something, I always skip the Lwaxana Troi episodes because they contribute absolutely nothing to the show in any way, and they're huge wastes of time. And why are you putting this horrible character who has nothing to do with anyone on this show on this otherwise awesome show? So yeah, what's with Lwaxana Troi showing up like 3 or 4 times? What is the deal with that? But other than that, not really, not really. And of course, I agree with you about Voyager defanging the Borg. Of course, I agree with you about that. That is absolutely true. Black Cover 95. Not to sound like a hater, but what was up with your shower video? It wasn't like anything you usually do, and it seemed a little too straightforward for comedy. I don't recall any particularly relevant social commentary in it either. Is there a reference I'm missing? Not really. I mean, I suppose there's a little teensy weensy bit of cultural commentary in the sense that with like the gun stuff at the end, you know, and the way like here in the United States, gun culture is so pervasive that like, you know, even a seemingly innocuous like cleanliness and hygiene video can actually just be something produced by, you know, an armaments company. And then there's also like there's the weird sort of religious aspect to it. You know, it's the cleanliness is next to manliness series, and no one should ever be allowed to see your nakedness, and when your clothes are dirty they have to be washed, even your robe that presumably you only wear from the bedroom into the bathroom, it's been on your body and it's unclean and it has to be washed every day. Like sort of obsessive kind of puritanical quasi-religious weird obsession with cleanliness and purity. Maybe there's a little bit of satire in that, but mostly I just wanted to make a funny video, and I wrote what I thought was a funny script, and I recorded it, or you know, I made what I thought was, and what I do think is a funny video. I'm really proud of how that video turned out. So you know, and it's not. I don't do videos like that often, but I have done them before. I do occasionally if I have what I think is a good enough idea, like I will do kind of just a sketch, you know, just a little skit, and you know, so those they do pop up from time to time. But I have to have a good enough idea and a strong enough concept that makes it seem worth doing, you know. But no, I don't think you missed anything too obvious or too important. It's just a funny video I wanted to make, and that's what I did. So, Stephen G. Clenard. Hey, Steve. So it looks like Star Trek Legacy is going to be a thing, allowing fans to warp down memory lane with Captain Seven, Raffi, David Marcus, and the rest. Rather than fighting a losing battle against lazy nostalgia, I've decided to turn my talents to throwing out my best Star Trek Legacy ideas, gratis. So here goes. Don't you wonder whatever happened to the rogue changelings that had infiltrated Starfleet and the Federation and had our desperate heroes on the run? They were everywhere. Why was the threat neutralized when they sent Vadic out the airlock? Was she something like the rogue changeling queen? Did changeling Tuvok sit around with his humanoid thumb up his humanoid ass for a year, allowing Dr. Crusher so much time to invent her changeling detector? And who better to help our crew solve this mystery than Ishara Yar, Tasha's sister, TNG Season 4, Episode 6, Legacy? So considering the ongoing Screenwriters Guild strike, does this make me a scab? Only if you sell this to the studio. Yeah, if you sell if you sell it to the studio, then yeah, you're totally a scab. But until then, I think you're safe. It's a great idea. It's a great idea. And if this is going to be your new sort of recurring bit in your questions for a while, I completely support it. I completely support it. And also, yes, uh, it it doesn't make sense that the changeling threat basically disappeared after Vatic was killed. It doesn't make sense that yeah, apparently the changelings just stayed in Starfleet and kept to themselves for a year because yeah, there was 1 year later, and then we get the update on Beverly invented a changeling detector. It's like, okay, so what were the changelings doing in the meantime? Just kind of hanging out. Um, yeah, it's almost like it was a really badly written season, and the changelings were just there to kill time for the first 8 episodes so they could get to the real story. And actually, the screenwriters had no real plan for what the changelings were doing there, and their participation in the story ultimately meant nothing. It's, it's almost like that. Like it was just a really badly written show. Kara Hughes, hi Steve. I know you have said that a continuation series of DS9 would not necessarily work, but with the right writers and not a bunch of people who on occasion seem determined to butcher canon, do you think it could work? After all, Kira was left in charge of DS9, and could you not make a Picard-like series set on that space station, possibly entitled Kira? Or am I hoping too much, especially with perhaps a more satisfying ending for Captain Sisko? It's not that it couldn't possibly work. Yes, of course it could work with the right story, with the right creative team, with the right approach. Of course it could work. My issue with doing a DS9 continuation series in the same way that they did Picard as like a Captain Picard / TNG continuation series isn't so much that I think it couldn't work. It's that I don't want to see it. I don't think that is where Star Trek's energies should be directed. I think if Star Trek's producers, writers, creators want to make a new Star Trek show, they should make a new Star Trek show, not a revival of an old Star Trek show. I don't think that is a good use of talent or energy. And just myself personally as a fan, I would much rather see a new show about new people doing new things than a show that is about, hey, remember that series you loved 30 years ago? Well, let's see what they're up to now. Like, I don't care. The story's over. I love Deep Space Nine. I've said many times, Deep Space Nine is far and away my favorite Star Trek show. Not only my favorite Star Trek show, one of my favorite shows, period. I love it. I love it to death. It's over. It had 7 years. It's over. That book is closed. Please don't open the book. Please write another book about other people. You can do it in the same series, in the same universe. I love Star Trek. New Star Trek show, new people, please. So that's my problem with it. Not that I think it couldn't possibly work, just that, like, for the love of God, please do something new. I mean, yeah, a Kira show, sure. Actually, I think a show centered on Kira would be a more interesting starting point than a show centered on Sisko, because Sisko was the lead of the old show. And I mean, Kira was a lead, but she was like a second lead of the old show. Please don't have Kira still be in charge of Deep Space Nine. Like, please, if you're going to call it Kira and it's going to be centered on Major Kira or Colonel Kira or Kira Nerys, whatever her position happens to be, it's been 30 years. Please have her doing something else. Don't have her still be in that office on Deep Space Nine. Like, have her she's somewhere else doing something else. And then tell a story that gets her in motion and doing something, you know? Yeah. But yeah, so there's no reason why it couldn't work. And I think I said a few weeks ago, maybe even a few months ago at this point, if they did insist on bringing Captain Sisko back, my suggestion would be he's been back for 20 years. Like, he was in the wormhole for a while and then he came back, and that all happened a long time ago. And now he's back. You know, instead of making the show about, oh, what happened to Captain Sisko? He disappeared. He never came back. And let's come up with like this really great idea for what brings him back and what he's been doing all along. Nope, that happened a long time ago. Don't worry about it. That's not important. You know, he was in the wormhole for a while. He came back. He's been back for a while. We're all kind of over it now. You know, he's retired from Starfleet. He's doing, or he's still in Starfleet, but he's doing something else, or whatever. Come up with a good Captain Cisco story that has nothing to do with picking up exactly where you left off 30 years ago. Please, for the love of God. But yeah, that's just throwing a few things out there. But no, I would much rather see them do something new than try to reheat Deep Space Nine. Crangus McBasketball. Hi, Steve. Have you ever been turned off of something just because of how annoying a fan base is? For me, it's Andor. I watched the first episode and found it to be kind of okay at best, but the fan base makes it sound like it's the most revolutionary thing ever produced for television. The way the fan base wants Star Wars to only be like Andor now, i.e., dark and mature, kind of baffles me, since I feel like people forget this is ultimately a franchise that is meant to sell toys and theme park tickets. What show does this for you? Bonus points if you don't say season 3 of Picard. I mean, I see what you're talking about with Andor. The people who liked Andor, I mean, really fucking liked it. Like there were a lot of people who were like there were episodes of Andor that I would watch. There was one episode of Andor that I watched. I think it was maybe episode 4 or 5, maybe episode 6. I can't remember. It was the second episode when he was in prison. And I mean, nothing happens in this episode. This episode is like 45, 50 minutes. Nothing happens. Characters stand around and do nothing for almost an hour. And it gets to the end. And you get to the end of the last scene, and there's like this really dramatic camera move pushing in on Andor and the other prisoners working on the big widgets that they're working on. But nothing is happening in terms of plot, in terms of story. Nothing's happening. They're just doing their thing. And then it's a big dramatic camera move, like, ooh, and then it cuts to black credits. I laughed out loud. I laughed out loud because it was one of the most pointless things I had ever seen on television. And I read reviews of it like the next day, and they were talking about it like it was the rebirth of television. Like it was just one of the greatest things they'd ever seen. And I thought it was just literally laughably bad. So I get what you're saying about the Andor fans. But for me, I don't know. The only thing I can think of that comes close to that are the toxic Zack Snyder fans. And it's not exactly what you're getting at in the question, because like I was not a fan of those movies to begin with. Like I don't like Man of Steel because I think Man of Steel is a bad movie. I don't like Batman v Superman because I think Batman v Superman is a really bad movie. And I don't like either version of the Justice League because I think they are bad movies. But any goodwill I could have felt toward those movies is completely destroyed by the toxicity of the fandom. Any degree of enjoyment that I could get from watching one of those movies and thinking, oh, that action scene was actually pretty good, or that costume design is kind of neat, or that was a good sequence, or that was a well-framed shot, or that was a nice line of dialogue, or whatever. Like, it's like there's no chance to derive any appreciation from it because the fans are so toxic and so obnoxious and so fucking clueless. They've never seen another movie in their fucking lives. They've seen like Zack Snyder movies and that's it. And they're convinced that he's fucking Sergei Eisenstein and he's reinventing cinema as he goes. And it's like, you fucking ignorant little shits. You know nothing. You know nothing about nothing. Yeah. That it's not exactly the same thing because it's not like, well, if not for the fans, I would like these movies. I wouldn't like the movies anyway. But what makes me feel like opposed to the movies is the fandom and the over the top, obnoxiousness of it. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Joe McClory, thank you for your kind words, and thank you to everyone who helps support my family financially and emotionally. That being said, I feel like it is a good time to focus on joy. What are some things, news stories, movies, shows, new YouTube channels, or podcasts, anything that has given you joy and think could bring joy to me and other fans? Oh, man. I mean, I've talked about it already, but the new Guardians is fantastic. I mean, the new Guardians of the Galaxy is just fucking amazing. I would highly recommend that you go see it. Um, Especially if you're a fan of the Guardians movies or if you're a fan of Marvel movies or whatever. But even if it's not really your thing, I mean, and now I'm not talking just to you, Joe, but more broadly. But even if Marvel movies or superhero movies or whatever aren't really your thing, I just it's just it's a beautiful fucking movie, and I really really liked it a lot. So I mean, that's been the big thing for me recently. Um, yeah, I can't really think of anything else off the top of my head. Um, yeah, I can't think of anything else. I mean, as far as news stories, nothing jumps to mind. Um, I haven't really been watching any new shows. The shows that I watch regularly have still been good. I realized I had missed like 3 episodes of Bob's Burgers over the past few weeks. So I saw those sort of piled up on Hulu. So I watched the Bob's Burgers episodes that I've been missing. And I mean, it's still a great show. It's still a funny as hell show. One of the recent episodes was about the kids become involved in this theatrical local wrestling company, which is kind of right up my alley. Like if it was real wrestling, it would not be the kind of wrestling that I enjoy. But because it's a combination of wrestling and Bob's Burgers, and the fact that it's like kind of a theatrical, you know, wrestling company is what allows the Belcher kids to get involved with it. So it facilitates the story to make it that kind of wrestling company. And I thought it was hilarious and wonderful. I thought it was great. Um, what else? There was something else I was going to say. I just thought of it, and then it just flew out of my head. Um, I can't think of it. I don't know, but those are a couple of things. I don't know. Hopefully, maybe people in the chat have some suggestions for stuff as well. Dana the Exhausted. Hi, Steve. Happy Friday. Students have 2 more weeks of school, and whoo lordy, is it bananas around here. Anyway, on to my ask. You mentioned that there was a comment on your review of the most recent Guardians movie that kind of stuck out to you because it was appreciative of the way you discussed your reaction to the movie rather than just listing the fandom cameos and Easter eggs that were in it. You said that those things aren't what you enjoy about a movie. It's more important that it has a good story and that you care about the characters. That implies that there are stories in which you don't care about the characters. And that's what gave me an idea for my question. What elements in the way a story is told get you to care about its characters? This isn't true in every case. I can't say every single time that I've ever found myself caring about characters in a film has been because of this, but this is a surefire way to do it. If you want to get me to care about the characters in your story, convince me that your characters care about each other. Because that's the big thing with the Guardians movies. I believe that these people care about each other, and that makes me care about them, and that makes me care what happens to them. I've said before, the moment that Deep Space Nine really, not necessarily the moment where this happened, but the moment where I realized why I love Deep Space Nine as much as I do, and that it had like burrowed its way into my chest as deeply as it had, was from an episode of Deep Space Nine that is not a very well remembered episode. It's the episode Meridian, the one where Jadzia Dax falls in love with the guy who lives on the planet that phases in and out of the universe every 50 years. And there's a scene where Jadzia, because she's fallen in love with this guy, she's decided she's going to live with him on this planet that is going to vanish in a few days and not come back for 50 years. So she's going to leave her friends, including her best friend, Ben Sisko. And there's a scene where Dax and Sisko are in Dax's cabin on the Defiant, and she's about to leave, and they're saying goodbye. And even though you watch this episode, and even back when it was first on TV, you know this isn't going to stick. You know, this episode, it's maybe halfway through season 3. Like, you know, Dax ain't going anywhere, right? Dax isn't leaving the show in the middle of the season and they're not writing her out by having her go move to this fucking planet that's going to disappear like this, this isn't going to stick. Something's going to happen. And by the end of the episode, Dax is going to be back on the station with everybody else. But even with that expectation in the back of your head, I watched that scene and that scene works for me because I believe that Dax and Cisco are real people who really care about each other, and they're saying goodbye, and they're going to miss each other. That feels emotionally real to me when I watch that scene. And what I realized from that scene is that's why I love the entire show. Because I believe that these are real people and that their friendships with one another are real and that they love each other and care about each other. And that makes me care about them. And that makes me care what happens to them. So it's very easily stated like that. Now, it's a great challenge, not only for a writer, but for performers and for all people involved in the filmmaking process. Like, it's a great challenge to realize that and to make a show that is capable of doing that to a viewer. But you can boil it down to something really simple like that. If you want me to care about the characters, convince me that the characters care about each other. Or if it's not that kind of a story, if there's maybe a single protagonist and the story isn't built around the character having relationships with other characters, convince me that they care about something. Convince me that whatever the movie is about, whatever the thing is that they want in the movie, convince me that they really want that they really care about that. You know, if there's something they need to stop from happening, convince me. Never mind the stakes. Never mind what happens if they fail. You know, the world comes to an end, whatever. Convince me that they really care about what happens there. Convince me that they really want to stop that thing from happening, or that they really want to make that happen, or whatever it is. Convince me that they care about something, and that makes me care about them. So yeah, much easier said than done. But that's really the heart of it for me. Shazy, who's trying to figure kinky things out. Good evening, Steve. As a heterosexual man, do you or have you felt as though you wanted to sleep or at least be on good terms with every attractive woman you came across? If so, if I came across them, I'm probably on good terms with them already. You know what I'm saying? I apologize. If so, how would you suggest to men with high sex drives on how to reconcile these biological urges with respecting women's personal boundaries and agency? Most importantly, not basing their self-worth on how many women they've slept with and taking rejection in a graceful and grounded manner. This could apply to men not looking for a long-term partner and wanting to stay flexible with intimate relations, but I believe such advice could stand to benefit all men during their formative years as well. Thank you. Thank you for assuming I would have anything useful to say on this subject. As far as how do you reconcile your sexual urges, your sex drive with respecting women's personal agency and boundaries? You know, there's a great moment from an old episode of MacGyver where MacGyver, and this is from season 3, I think, because Nikki Carpenter is in it. Nikki was only in one season. There's a scene in MacGyver where MacGyver and Nikki are on a mission and they're out in the wilderness in Eastern Europe and they have to camp out. So MacGyver builds a campfire and they each sort of lay down next to the fire, and they're not like snuggled up against each other or anything, but they're close, you know. And they sleep through the night, and MacGyver wakes up and Nikki is already up and tending the fire, you know. And, you know, they say good morning. And Nikki says, well, MacGyver, I have to hand it to you. You were a perfect gentleman last night. And MacGyver just kind of nods, kind of goes with it. And he says, yeah, you know, I don't know how I did it, but somehow I controlled myself. And it's really as simple as that, isn't it? It doesn't matter. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what you want. If another person is involved and they're not into it, it doesn't matter what you want. You don't act on your urges, period. Like, you control yourself. You know, if you find another person attractive and you really want to fuck that person, well, if you can get to know them and, you know, they get to know you, and then they decide that they want to fuck you and you want to fuck them, well, then, yeah, absolutely. Now you're off to the races. Go for it. But if it's just you looking at someone from across a room and seeing her and finding her physically attractive and going, God damn, it doesn't matter what you want. And that person you find attractive doesn't owe you anything, doesn't owe you anything. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. There's a sense of entitlement that can creep in, especially for heterosexual guys in our culture, which teaches us to view our sex drive and the sex drives of women in different ways. Where with men, it's, well, men have needs, you know, women just don't look at it the same way that men do. Men have needs, and sometimes we just have to do what we have to do. And with women, it's different, right? Which is horseshit. But there is that assumption that is kind of taught to people culturally from a young age. So you need to see past that and realize that that's bullshit, and just realize that if you find and it goes for people of all different orientations. It's not just hetero men and women. It's no matter what you are, no matter what you're interested in. If you find someone else attractive and they don't even know you, they owe you nothing. And the fact that you find them attractive and want to fuck them does not matter to anyone except for you. So keep it in your pants until you get into a situation with that other person where they want to fuck you just as much as you want to fuck them. Then go for it. But don't feel entitled to it. And also have a little empathy for the other person. Like, if you are in a bar or a restaurant and you see a really beautiful waitress, think for a second and realize, even if she doesn't have a significant other already, she probably gets hit on 1,000,000 times a day by assholes just like you who want to fuck her. And maybe just don't. Like, maybe just leave her alone. Just be a good customer for her. Order your food, leave her a nice tip. Don't make her job any more difficult than it has to be. And don't fucking ask her for a number or flirt with her or whatever. Just leave her the fuck alone, other than interacting with her in the capacity of her being your server, right? Other than that, just let her do her fucking job, because she's got enough problems without you sniffing after her, you know? Now, if you and her seem to actually have a rapport, like if she makes a joke or you make a joke and there's like, and you, it seems like there's some kind of mutual chemistry there, yeah, sure, take a chance, go for it. But if you're just like trying out pickup lines on her or trying to make something happen when she does not seem interested, fucking leave that alone. So basically, just don't be such entitled pricks. Keep it in your pants. Don't act like anybody owes you something just because you want to fuck them. And control yourself. John Burns. I liked Adam Conover's rant on CMN about the WGA. But no one's advocating for $250 million salary for every writer, right? What makes sense for a resolution? What should compensation be for writers who are salaried employees? And what should be acceptable for a non-salaried employee? Plus, if you write a sketch in a talk show, can you get extra for acting in that sketch? Okay, let me take these a few at a time. First of all, I am not the best person to ask about any of this, because I don't have any special insight into any of it, because I've never worked in show business and I've never been a member of the Writers Guild or any other professional show business guild. So I honestly don't know the answer to a lot of these questions. What makes sense for a resolution in general terms, in terms that I can speak to, is giving the writers a fair minimum salary, which is something that they're asking for. They're asking for a bump in minimum salary for writers so that they get fair compensation for the actual work that they do in producing the content that then gets made into the shows or the films or whatever. And then on top of that, if they work on something that does actually get produced and generates revenue for the studio, they, because they contributed to that, get a fair share of the revenue that it produces. So they get paid for their labor, and then they get paid a residual on top of that that allows them to share in a fair portion of the fruits of their labor. I can't tell you specific numbers, but that's the general idea. And that's something that the guild is trying to hammer out. And they are in a much better situation, a much better position to know what is fair and what is not denied. But that's the general idea. And yeah, if you write a sketch in a talk show, not only can you get extra for acting in that sketch, you should get extra for acting in that sketch. And if you don't, then you should speak to your guild representative. Like, yeah, absolutely. You get paid for everything you do. That's one of the reasons why having unions, especially in a business as complex, with so many interlocking roles as show business, that's why having unions or guilds is such a necessity and is such a good thing. Because in large measure, because of the agreements put in place by collective bargaining, you are entitled to get paid for pretty much anything you do. So if you are primarily a writer, but you write a sketch and then you appear as a performer in that sketch, your appearance as a performer in that sketch could entitle you to also join the Screen Actors Guild. And then as a member of the Screen Actors Guild, you're covered by that collective bargaining agreement. And yes, you get paid, and you should get paid. Like if you write a sketch for a show and then you also appear as a performer in that sketch, you should get paid something extra for that because you're doing extra work. You wrote it and now you're in it. So you're goddamn right you should get something extra for that. And like I say, in most cases you will, thanks to collective bargaining agreements reached because of the guilds. Russell, good afternoon, Steve. I guess old habits don't die easily. Here I am again getting this in last minute. As always, thank you for your patience. I've been dealing with something very personal, and before I include this question on your Q&A, I would like your permission to send you a DM on Twitter to get your thoughts, then proceed. I could really use an outsider's opinion, but like I said, it is of a personal nature to me. Nothing to do with you, by the way. So in the meantime, I guess I will ask a standard question, one that has me curious on people's thoughts, especially given this is a Star Trek fan-based community. Your honest opinions of Star Trek V. No, is it canon? Does it count? Or do you skip this one? Or if you do enjoy it, how come? For me, I don't care if it is canon or not, but it is a movie I tend to skip a lot and come back to every 3 or 4 years. Anyway, see you shortly. Yeah, I don't care if it's canon or not either, but I consider it canon because why wouldn't it be? Like, I have never heard a remotely compelling argument from anyone who says it shouldn't be considered canon as to why it shouldn't be. So I consider it canon. Of course I do. It's not a good movie, but I enjoy watching it. There are times when, even though it is not a good movie, if I feel like watching a Star Trek movie, sometimes Star Trek V is the Star Trek movie I want to watch because it's a really easy watch. It's not super long. It's certainly not very demanding philosophically or intellectually. It's just an easy watch. And it's very affable, you know, and actually, even though it's not a good movie, there are moments of, going back to what I was saying in answer to Dana's question about, convince me that the characters care about each other. There are moments in Star Trek V of genuine camaraderie and friendship among the crew of the Enterprise that you don't see all that often in the movies. And I really like the classic Star Trek movies, but there is an easy sense of comfort and camaraderie, and these people have worked together for a long time and they know each other and they see each other like family, and it's just a very unbothered sense that you have among the crew in Star Trek V. And I really like that. There's a moment early in the film when they've all come back aboard the Enterprise for the first time. They've been called back from shore leave, and they're about to leave on their mission to Nimbus 3. And um, Kirk gives them a little speech, about, I'm sorry that shore leave has been cut short, everybody, but we have a mission to do, and blah, blah, blah. And Chekhov has taken his station and is about to, do his thing and set the course to take the ship to where it needs to go. And Kirk just puts his hand on Chekhov's shoulder, just for a second, just a friendly, comforting, sort of quasi fatherly gesture of, all right, buddy, let's go. Here we go again, that kind of thing. And it's just a really nice moment, and it feels natural and it feels real, which is extraordinary because William Shatner and Walter Koenig fucking hated each other, especially from Koenig's direct. Koenig hated Shatner. I don't know if Shatner necessarily hated Koenig, but he, I think there were times when he barely could remember his name, even though at that point they'd been working together for over 20 years. But it's just a really nice moment of friendship and of like these two guys have obviously served together for a long time and they're comfortable with each other, and I like that. There are moments like that in the movie that make me like it. So yeah, I don't think it's a very good movie, but I have no like ill will towards it at all. And last question from Sant Merck. Hey Steve, I don't have a substantive question this time, so I'll throw this at you. Some website put up their Mount Rushmore of horror characters, and they chose Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, and Ghostface. I was upset that they only chose slashers and relatively recent characters. In my own, I tried to cover a greater breadth of horror. I chose Dracula to rep the Universal monsters, and because he is the horror icon, Godzilla because he codified the kaiju genre and represents the creature features, Michael Myers because he is the slasher, and Pennywise the clown because he's one of my personal terrors, and he is, to my mind, Stephen King's most iconic character. And that covers another swath of horror. Who would be on yours and why? Side note, both Drac and Godzilla have become viewed as not horror anymore, and I think that's largely due to their own success, seeing them adapted into all ages media so they can be sold to kids. Is that inevitable for horror icons past a certain point? Yeah, I think probably it is. They reach, they sort of become mainstream and then they reach beyond the boundaries of the genre. Who would be on my horror Mount Rushmore? I would also want there to be a universal monster, but I would not go Dracula. I would go Boris Karloff's Frankenstein. I would also want to have the Max Schreck Count Orlok version of Dracula from the original F.W. Murnau Nosferatu, because I feel like for me as a lover of silent films and a lover of F.W. Murnau's work in particular, and especially of Nosferatu, and I love both versions of Nosferatu. I love the Herzog version as well. But if we're going for horror movie Mount Rushmore, I think you got to go with Count Orlok from the original silent Nosferatu, Boris Karloff's Frankenstein from the Universal monsters, maybe Christopher Lee's Dracula from the Hammer films, and for the fourth one, it's tough. I mean, I'm tempted to say, like, I'm tempted to say like just a generic sort of George Romero type zombie. You could say like Bud from Day of the Dead, or the zombie, the head zombie from Night of the Living Dead. But maybe just a generic Romero type zombie to represent all of the Romero zombie movies and the Romero and the zombie movie genre in general, I think. So those would be my four. A Romero zombie would stand in for kind of that whole subgenre. And then, yeah, Christopher Lee's Dracula and Karloff's Frankenstein and Count Orlok from the original Nosferatu. There you go. So, yeah, that's it for the patron and member questions. Thanks, everybody, for being a patron and a member. Now, I'm going to turn to the live chat here in just a minute. But first, I have another Stuffy short to show everybody. So this, as has become my custom for Ask Away, will be the full frame version of a brand new stuffy YouTube short. It's only about a minute long, and you get to see the full frame version here tonight on the live stream. And then tomorrow at noon Eastern time, it will go up in square format as a standalone YouTube short, and you can watch it then too if you want. And actually, that would be great. But for right now, because you're joining me live watching Ask Away, I will show you the world premiere of a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. So enjoy this, won't you? Was that your Uncle Floppy you were on the phone with this morning?
It sure was. He was calling to see if I was coming to the wedding.
Are you?
Well, it's in Arizona, so it's a long trip. But I've always liked Uncle Floppy. And I've only ever seen pictures of his fiancée. I feel like I should get to know my new aunt.
I guess that makes sense.
Do you want to come with me? You can be my +1.
I'll go if you can't find someone else to go with you.
Okay.
But please find someone else to go with you. I'd rather hammer a railroad spike through my own scrotum than go to a wedding.
Duly noted.
This one goes on the top shelf. So what's his fiancée like? Is she a dog?
Steve.
You know what I meant. So there you have it. Brand new stuffy short. Goes up as a standalone tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it. I kind of like that one. I'm the motherfucker that that wrote it and started it. Of course I like it. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed it too. Now to the live chat to hang out with you folks in real time for the rest of the show. Let's see what everybody's talking about. Dana says, ooh, leading with Frankenstein. Yeah, I mean, I see before that. You better heckin' include Frankenstein. Yeah, I mean, to me, because I really don't think that the Bela Lugosi Dracula is all that great of a movie. Honestly, I mean, I see it, of course it's like the iconic thing, and Bela Lugosi's Dracula is like the most iconic cinematic version of that character still to this day. But as a movie, Todd Browning's Dracula is really, it's not that great for me. But Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein particularly are fucking masterpieces, are just great movies. So to me, the icon, the character that deserves to represent the Universal horror franchise, which I adore, that it's got to be Karloff's Frankenstein instead of Dracula. Some super chats coming in. Hello. 255 AD says, imagine you find out someone's faking disability for benefits. Would you care? Last week, me and Geek were talking about hypothetical, and we agree we wouldn't. I probably wouldn't. No, I mean, not unless, like, now, if the person was like a huge asshole, you know, and I wanted to fuck them by turning them in and saying, hey, they're faking disability to get benefits. Yeah, if it was that situation, I could see myself doing that. But as a general rule, no, I don't care. I don't care. For one thing, it happens so infrequently. It's not like it's a major problem and it's like, oh, you're ruining it for everybody else. Like, it's, you know, it's a tough fucking world. If you're not hurting anybody else, get what you can get. Like, I would not be super upset about that. Mandy, from John Burns, super chat. Mandy Patinkin's father died of cancer. When Mandy says, I want my father back, you son of a bitch, he's talking to cancer. You know, I think I heard him say that in an interview at one point. So yeah, that sounds familiar. Dana, well, it's assumed to be movies if they're asking me, because movies are my bailiwick. I mean, I obviously books would be more your deal, but if you come to me and you want a Mount Rushmore of something, it better be movies or comics or wrestling related, because those are kind of my deal. Or maybe baseball. I could put together a respectable baseball Mount Rushmore too. Oh, and Kirak, you have my consent to send me a DM. Now, I don't know if I don't follow you on Twitter. then you won't be able to send me one because my DMs aren't open except to people I follow. So if you wanted to give me your Twitter handle, I could make sure I'm following you, and then you could DM me at your convenience. But no, I have no problem with you DMing me about whatever it is. Pedro Noguera says, no one asked, but I'll say my horror Mount Rushmore. A Pazuzu-filled Reagan McNeil, Cronenberg's Fly, Karloff's Frankenstein Monster, and Pinhead. I think that's a pretty good one. I can get behind that. David Colby says, my favorite Dracula is the Coppola one. I love that movie. That's such a crazy fucking movie. Talk about movies that I just enjoy watching, that you know what I mean? Like, God, what a bonkers movie. I love that movie so much. Oh, Kane 20C, you actually want my baseball Mount Rushmore? Oh boy. Okay. Baseball Mount Rushmore. Babe Ruth. Can I have Babe Ruth twice? Because he was a pitcher and a hitter. You know, he was great, and he had two phases of his career, and they were equally great. No. Babe Ruth, Satchel Paige, Willie Mays. Babe Ruth, Satchel Paige, Willie Mays. Joe DiMaggio. Yeah. It's tough, though. You get down to where there's like one spot left. And the thing is, like, I could probably do Babe Ruth and three completely different guys, and it would be just as valid to me. Like, those are the ones I came up with just sitting here, like having just sort of thrown it out there. Like, I to me, the only one that absolutely needs to be there is Babe Ruth. Any baseball Mount Rushmore that doesn't have Babe Ruth on there somewhere is not valid to me. Babe Ruth has got to be on there. And honestly, if Willie Mays isn't on, Willie Mays is it's like, if Willie Mays isn't on your baseball Mount Rushmore, that's pretty suspect to me as well. Kane 20C, see, Jackie could be on there. I mean, the thing is, you only have 4 spots, so Jackie could definitely be on there. But Willie put up better numbers than Jackie. You know what I mean? Like, I think Willie. I mean, it's important to have. No, it's not. It's important historically, and also it's only fair because they were such fantastic players. But like, I mean, I think you need to have one of those first generation black major leaguers on there, because that first generation of black players after Jackie broke the color line. I mean, there are so many fucking amazing players in that generation. And then the generation that followed them as well. I mean, God, in the 60s and 70s, I mean, Jesus, look how many fantastic black ball players there were. So I think there needs to be representation there. But again, it's only 4 spots. And if I have, so if I have to choose between them, to me, I would go with Willie. But you could easily go with Jackie, and not just because Jackie was the guy who broke the color barrier, but because Jackie was also a fucking great player. Like, I mean, I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that everybody remembers Jackie Robinson because he was like the first black ball player. He was the first black major leaguer. And yeah, and that needs to be remembered and celebrated. But that wasn't the only accomplishment the guy had. I mean, he was legitimately a fucking fantastic baseball player. So, you know, it's tough. Mount Rushmore gives you 4 spots, so it's tough. Oh, thank you, Some Random Geek. I really appreciate that. Oh, Philip, if you haven't seen any of the old Universal Frankenstein movies, but you liked Gods and Monsters, I think you really need to watch Especially, well, watch them, but watch Frankenstein and watch Bride of Frankenstein, but especially Bride of Frankenstein because it's just fantastic. David, yeah, Bram Stoker's Dracula is probably one of the most book accurate Dracula movies I've ever seen. You're right. Yeah. Um, Greg Cervantes says, "Will I ever make what if videos?" I've made a few what if Star Trek videos. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever make them like exclusively, but if I come up with a good what if topic that I think I can make an interesting video out of, um, I've done it before, and yeah, I would do it again. Oh, Pedro says comic book creators Mount Rushmore. Ooh. Comic book creators Mount Rushmore. Will Eisner is number one, always. Jack Kirby. Will Eisner, Jack Kirby. Jerry Siegel. And I mean, I feel like if I say Stan Lee, I'm going to leave off all of the artists that Stan Lee worked with who did a lot of the work. You know what I mean? Like, oh. And I also I kind of want to say Frank Miller, but he's turned into such a fucking asshole, right? Like I want to say Frank Miller for Daredevil and for Batman Year One and Dark Knight Returns and Sin City, but he's become such a fucking asshole. I feel like a shit for putting him on Mount Rushmore because he's such a fucking dick. I don't know, maybe Neil Adams. But Neil Adams was also a fucking dick. There's so many comic creators that were geniuses that were fucking dicks or turned into fucking dicks later in life. Dana, yeah, Bill Finger, but I mean, like, no disrespect to Bill Finger, but like, and Bill Finger was, not only was he essentially the co-creator of Batman, but he also was a writer for DC for many years. So I mean, Bill Finger is not like a completely illegitimate choice, but I mean, see, I could also say Steve Ditko, but again, went completely nuts. And actually, Steve Ditko was always kind of like a, kind of a right wing shithead. So I don't know. Comics Mount Rushmore is probably even harder than baseball player Mount Rushmore. 255 AD says, I deliberately didn't include the possibility that Republican politicians, at least the mainstream ones like Cruz, actually believed in what they said, giving them too much credit. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't think it makes a difference whether they believe it or not. Like, I assume they do believe it. Like, I assume they do believe it. But if they don't, it really doesn't matter, you know? Ooh, George Perez, that's a good one. Dana, come on, let's keep perspective here, right? We all love Bill Finger. We all love Bill Finger because he co-created Batman. All right? But it's comic book Mount Rushmore, and there's only 4 spots. Does Bill Finger really deserve to be one of the 4 spots on comic book Mount Rushmore? I'm just saying I don't know if he does. Is Bill Finger as important as Jack Kirby? I don't think he is. Is Bill Finger as important as Will Eisner? I don't think he is. Is Bill Finger as important as one of the co-creators of Superman? Like, and is he? I just, these are tough questions. These are tough questions. It's not Batman creator. It's not Batman creative artist or creative team member Mount Rushmore. It's comic book creator Mount Rushmore. John Burns says NHL Mount Rushmore. I have no idea. I have no idea. 225AD says, my take on the pedantic fan thing is it's disheartening to see inconsistencies in a world you wish was real because it reminds you it's not. And is that too generous? Maybe. I guess it depends on how much sympathy you have for that point of view. Like, I mean, I do think that may be the case for some of them. Yeah. I mean, but I don't think it remotely, and I'm not saying you're saying this either, but I mean, it doesn't remotely justify them being dicks to other people. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe it is disheartening because inconsistencies take you out of it. But guess what? It's fiction. Grow up, get over it, enjoy it. You know, if you enjoy it, if the story speaks to you, if you care about the characters, if you care about the story, then enjoy it. And when an inconsistency crops up that reminds you that it's fiction, well, guess what? It is fiction. Get over it. Alan Moore. Ooh, Crangus. Alan Moore. Yeah. Yeah. Alan Moore. Fuck. Alan Moore might have to go up there. Kirek 2011 with a super chat says, now changing the subject, I wanted your opinion on Greg Medavoy. How do you rate him as a detective on the show? What are some of your favorite moments? Oh, I love Medavoy. And I think he's shown to be a pretty good detective. I mean, he's kind of like the one of the comic relief characters. But I think he's also, I don't think he's really ever shown to be like an incompetent detective. I mean, most of his problems are due to his own lack of self-confidence as opposed to him like being a bad detective or anything. My favorite Medavoy moment is the one where there's the episode where he thinks that he's too soft. So he like tries to tune up a subject and like hits a guy with a phone book or something, and then realizes that he has crossed a line, you know? And I think Sipowicz talks to him about it and says, look, you're not the kind of guy to be like tuning guys up. You shouldn't do that. Like, that's not you. So then he eventually gets a suspect to confess by being nice to him and hugging him. And like he's hugging him and the guy is like tearfully like confessing to the crime in Medavoy's arms. That's my favorite Medavoy moment, I think. Jason McClane, I knew this was coming. Wrestling Mount Rushmore. And again, it's a tough question. But I have thought about this before. And I don't think, and again, it's tough because it's only 4 spots and there are more than 4 important professional wrestlers in history. But if I had to choose pro wrestling Mount Rushmore, I think I would have to go Strangler Lewis, Lou Thez, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin. Or if you wanted to leave off Strangler Lewis because like, oh, it was back in the 30s, who cares, you know? Or you could also make the argument, well, if you're going to go to Strangler Lewis, why not go back a little further and do Frank Gotch? You know what I mean? Or if you're going to do Strangler Lewis, why not do like, you know, Orville Brown or something? Like there's all it's a tough question because you only have 4 spots. But to me, Strangler Lewis was the biggest of the early pro wrestling stars, and the most enduring. I mean, there's like Jim Londos was a bigger box office draw than Strangler Lewis was, but Strangler Lewis is the name that history remembers, that even people who aren't necessarily huge wrestling fans still remember to this day. So Strangler Lewis, Lou Thez, the first great NWA world champion, the guy who set the template for, you know, the traveling NWA world champion. Hulk Hogan, the guy who was the figurehead of the 1980s wrestling explosion, and then Steve Austin, the guy who was the top guy of the 1990s pro wrestling explosion, the late 90s pro wrestling explosion. So those are the 4. But again, like with the baseball one, like you could easily make an argument for completely different people and it would be just as valid. And again, and hey, and that's only North America. Like that's only North America. That doesn't even mention Japan. You know, there's no Ricky Dozan, there's no Inoki, there's no Baba. You know, there's no Fujinami, there's no Misawa, there's no Kawada, you know, like it. So yeah, it's tough. Um, True 5 AD says, grow up. Fictional worlds can mean a lot to some. Well, they mean a lot to me. They mean a lot to me. But I try to keep perspective, you know? um, yeah, Dana, you're right. Hogan, and yeah, Hogan is definitely an asshole. But the thing is, here's the thing Hogan is an asshole, no question about it. But unfortunately, most of the other people from that era that could take that spot instead are also assholes. Or are just it's like you could I could say Dusty Rhodes. I would love to say Dusty Rhodes because I love Dusty Rhodes. And Dusty was a little bit of an asshole too, but not nearly in the same way or on the same level as Hogan. But Dusty wasn't as big of a star as Hogan, you know? At least not on a national level. I could say Ric Flair. Ric Flair was just as big of an asshole as Hulk Hogan was, and wasn't as big of a star as Hulk Hogan was. Again, on a national level. Um, so it's tough. It's tough. Um, okay, super chat from Kirak says my favorite Metavoy moment is in Simone Says, where he interrogates a father having relations with his kid, and at the end, Metavoy is like, "I hope they lock you up, you sick SOB." I remember that. It's a good, yeah, that's a good one. Um, Oh, and also Kirak says, I forgot I can send you a message through member, so no pressure to follow me on Twitter. I will do it that way. But like I said, it is okay. Well, maybe get in touch with me privately, however you want. Patreon, not member. Yeah, well, however you want to do it, and you know that's fine. I don't mind. Um, John Burns of the Super Chat says, I asked that question because they both are black. Would that matter if you chose Gretzky, Bobby, or Patrick Roy? No to Lemieux, position over color. I mean, like I said, I'm not a hockey fan. I don't know the history of hockey. If there are black players who have made a significant contribution to the sport of hockey, and it would be an oversight to leave them off of the list, then I think it would be right to include them. I mean, the thing about when I say that you should have a first generation black major leaguer on baseball Mount Rushmore, it's not just because of, well, you know, there should be representation because it's only fair. That was arguably the most important thing that ever happened to Major League Baseball. Like, it's not just, well, it's only fair to have a black guy on there if you're going to have a bunch of white guys. Like, it's not about tokenism, you know, it's about acknowledging a very, very important part of baseball history, you know, and also acknowledging a group of players that were absolutely phenomenal and changed the game for the better for generations. Cranjus McBasketball, just put John Cena or Dave Batista if you want two reportedly nice guys on the list. Well, yeah, if I'm just putting on nice guys, then yeah, you know, and yeah, and the Rock as well. I mean, here's the thing. Again, it's like it's only four spots. The Rock and Steve Austin were contemporaries, and within the world of pro wrestling, Steve Austin was a bigger deal than The Rock. Now, The Rock became a much bigger deal than Steve Austin once he got out of wrestling and became a movie star. And like now, of course, like way more people know about The Rock than know about Steve Austin. Rock's a much bigger star. But in the wrestling world, Steve Austin was a much bigger deal than The Rock was. If Steve Austin had not become a star, The Rock may not have become as big of a star as he did, again, in wrestling. So if you're going to, so it like, you know, there's only four spots. It's really impossible for me to justify taking up two spots to give one to Steve Austin and to give one to The Rock. I can justify giving one to Steve Austin and not one to The Rock. It would be very difficult for me to justify giving one to The Rock but not giving one to Steve Austin. You know what I'm saying? So, Well, listen, 255 AD, it's fine if the inconsistencies bug you a bit. It's not a problem that like you notice them and they bug you. It's when when someone notices them and they get bugged about it, and and then they use that as an excuse to be an asshole, or to act like the creators of the show owe it to them to make sure there are no inconsistencies, because like I take this shit seriously. Well, lots of people take this shit seriously. Fucking relax. But there's nothing wrong with noticing things that are inconsistent, and having like eh, having a little bit of a personal issue with it, or thinking like, oh gee, that's too bad, or whatever, or that takes me out of it. Just don't be a jerk about it. you know um Roddy Piper, Zeb S. Yeah, Roddy Piper is another one. Good choice for a pro wrestling Mount Rushmore. Um, if we were doing like like greatest pro wrestling promo Mount Rushmore, then Roddy's got to be on there. Yeah, Kemp, I agree. Steve Austin, greater than The Rock. Again, as a wrestler. Now, The Rock as a movie star, as a general sort of media personality, I think you would have to give the edge to The Rock, at least in terms of like popularity and how well known he is. But as a wrestler, oh, it's Steve Austin all day. And that's another thing. Like you could go in terms of, who were the biggest box office attractions, and then you would have to say, I mean, you would still have to say Hogan, and you would have to say Austin, but you would also have to say Jim Londos, who was a huge box office attraction in the 20s and 30s. And you'd probably have to say Andre the Giant, because he was a major box office attraction throughout the 1970s, in the territory days, all over the country, and in Japan as well. He was a huge box office attraction. So you'd have to throw Andre in there as well. It depends on what your main criteria is for choosing, you know, who goes on Mount Rushmore, who goes on Wrestling Mount Rushmore. Thomas Kent has an interesting question. To go into a different direction, what about violence where no one gets hurt? BattleBots. Have you ever watched them? Um, I watched BattleBots maybe once or twice, but it didn't really grab me. It just didn't really grab me. I mean, it looks like fun. Like I definitely get the appeal, but it just wasn't something that made me think like, oh, I got to watch that. Jason, I know we've been talking about pro wrestling Mount Rushmore for longer than we were talking about comic book creator Mount Rushmore, or baseball Mount Rushmore, or horror movie Mount Rushmore, or anything. Yeah, Dana, Andre also apparently not a jerk. Except in ways that were completely understandable. Like I've heard stories of, when Andre was traveling, especially in his later years when his weight had gone up and physically he was not doing well. He might be a little surly if people came up and bothered him for an autograph at the airport, or when he was, sitting down trying to have a moment to himself. He might be a little, standoffish or not very nice. But you have to give him that, like. Harry Behemoth says CM Punk is the best in the world. Well, I'll tell you what, I sure hope that the rumors are true, that he's coming back to AEW and he's going to be the franchise of the new Saturday night show, Because if that is true, and if the Saturday night show turns out to be how it has been described in the various rumors I have read on the internet, then I will no longer be watching wrestling on Wednesday nights. I will be watching wrestling on Saturday nights. Yeah. Steve Schmaling says, just how long does it take to film yourself washing your genitals before it's uncomfortable? Asking for a friend. I'll tell you a little secret. I wasn't actually washing my genitals the entire time. Actually, I had to take that scene in the shower video. I had to do that a few times before I got a take that I thought was usable. Mostly because I just kept laughing. That bit where I washed my junk for a very, very, very long time was the first joke that I really thought of for that. And I as long as I've been thinking about doing this video, which is years now, I always knew I wanted to do that bit. And when I finally got to it, like I was first, I would do it, and I'd be going for a while, and I'm not actually like making contact and doing anything. Like I'm just moving my arms down in the general area. So because it's shot from the waist up, so I'm not actually touching anything. Um, or else chafing may have been an issue at some point. But I start laughing because it just is going on for so long, and it starts to get ridiculous to me. And then I start thinking about it, and I'm like, what should the motion be? Like, what should the arm motion be? So I eventually settled on what is in the video, which is it's a couple of different motions. Sometimes it's like this. Sometimes it's both arms. At one point, it's like this. Or like this. It just goes through a couple of different phases, and then it cuts in the middle. Like he's still moving when it cuts to the next thing. So I really like how it worked out. I think the version that is in the video is really good, but it took multiple takes while I was shooting it, and mainly it was because I was cracking myself up, and then I was starting to overthink it and try to figure out, okay, what should this actually look like on camera? John Burns with the super chat. I think my point was there wasn't a Negro league alongside the NHL to show an imbalance. Very good white players never played in the NHL in the 60s. Okay, and like I say, maybe there wasn't like a significant population of black hockey players who wanted to get into the NHL and were kept out. Like maybe that just wasn't the case. The reason the Negro leagues existed wasn't just because black players weren't allowed in the major leagues. It was because there were a lot of black baseball players who wanted to play professional organized baseball and were kept out of the major leagues, so they started their own teams. If that was not the case with hockey, then I guess there wouldn't have been an NHL equivalent of the Negro League. Yeah, Dana, exactly. And that's true. And in Andre's later years, he was in pain pretty much all the time. Harry Behemoth. I heard that Andre accidentally ate a lady's baby on a red-eye flight, swallowed it whole, didn't even notice. Yeah, and that woman has been telling that fucking story nonstop ever since. Will not shut up about it. God. How many babies do you think Andre the Giant ate in his life? Like, you're not special. Sorry, Steve. Yes, I wasn't. Sorry. I mean, look, you can still rub off to it. It's just, understand that it's a piece of art. It's a piece of fiction. It's not a documentary. Some random geek says, "How come there wasn't any instructions on washing one's butt? Is it that touching one's butt is gay?" No, you use the hand sprayer. That was mentioned very briefly in the video. You use the hand sprayer to wash your buttocks. And if the water pressure is sufficient, to also wash your rectum and your pelvic colon, I think was the line. Kemp, yes, I do use a washcloth. When I actually take a shower, I do use a washcloth, yes. Karak 2011 says, I get tired of my news break saying Obama was the worst. He was the last president I voted for. Your thoughts? Well, I voted for him twice too. And I'm not embarrassed that I did. I was proud to vote for Obama twice. And I did. And, he had his faults, some fairly serious ones, like all presidents do. But for the most part, especially on the sliding scale of presidents, I think he's near, he's much closer to the best side than the worst side for sure. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't the last president I voted for. Like I also voted for Hillary Clinton in that election, and I voted for Biden, and I'll vote for whoever the Democratic nominee is next time. Like I vote every presidential election. But yes, I voted for Obama twice, and I was very proud to. Um, 255 what was your last comment? Was it the franchise, the fictional franchise that you're really invested in? And there's a fictional franchise that means a lot to me, and inconsistencies bug me a bit. Maybe I'm projecting onto other fans who are less reasonable. It was at it because I think I already addressed that. If there was another one, I may have missed it, or maybe it didn't post. Um, Dana says she may not have been special, but her baby was. Was it though? Can we say that? Steve Schmeling says I use a power washer to wash my butt. Good for you. Good for you. Jason McLean says he's coming back, and Punk is a chaotic force and toxic in the workplace, which has turned me off of him as a performer. I will say this: if I were Tony Khan, and I'm not, but if I were Tony Khan, and there was a conflict in my locker room, and I was forced to make a choice, and I could only keep the Young Bucks or CM Punk, the Young Bucks would have been fired as soon as I could get rid of them. It's not even creatively, financially, it's not even a choice for me. If there's some kind of irreconcilable differences and I can only keep one, sorry Bucks, you're out of here. It's not even close. It's laughable how lopsided that choice is. Of course I would choose CM Punk over the fucking Young Bucks. And if any of the Young Bucks friends in the locker room wanted to leave too, they could go. And honestly, it probably wouldn't be that big of a loss. Like if Jungle Boy quit in protest, oh no, Jungle Boy's gone. Who gives a fuck? You know what would be great? If the next pay-per-view coming up with AEW, if the main event was Darby Allin versus MJF. Because I could actually get behind that match. Like that could be a really interesting, compelling match. MJF versus Darby for the world title. But throw in Sammy Guevara, who I have nothing against, but has no business being anywhere near the world title. And Jungle Boy, who is just nothing, is, like there's just no personality. He does unconvincing dives. I have never gotten the hype about Jungle Boy at all. I don't think he's that great. So instead of a compelling one-on-one match between Darby and MJF, we have a four-way match that I could not give less of a shit about, that throws in Jungle Boy and Sammy as fucking dead weight that just cloud the only interesting issue in the match, which is between Darby and MJF. So like if the Bucks, if I had to fire the Bucks or send the Bucks home and pay them all for their contract and say best of luck in your future endeavors, to get CM Punk back, I would have done that as soon as I was able to do it. Like I would not have dragged it out as long as Tony Khan has. And I know Tony's a nice guy, and I don't think he likes firing people and he feels loyalty to the Bucks because they're like founding members of the company, and the company takes its name from the name of their group and all that stuff. But I mean, come on. CM Punk, the Young Bucks. Oh yeah. How fucking hard is this? Okay, 255 AD. You talked empathy in your response. Does Cruz need to understand his daughter's by experience to understand the danger? Yes. He doesn't have to. Like, he could understand the danger while still not empathizing with his daughter. Like, he could be a really shitty dad, but still understand the harm that is being done to LGBTQ people. But if he did really understand and empathize with his daughter, I think it would help. Yeah, I think it would help. Um, Yeah, Jason, I agree. Look, I like Tony Khan a lot. Like, I don't know him, but just from the sense I get of his personality, like he seems like a really nice guy. And good Lord, I would much rather have him as like, you know, a titan of industry in pro wrestling than a fucking scumbag like Vince McMahon. Like, give me Tony Khan over Vince McMahon any day of the week. But he does seem like a weak leader. He does seem like not the best person to be in charge of creative and not the most disciplined storyteller in terms of long-term storytelling in wrestling. It would be great if he would actually turn that job over to someone who was better suited to it. Um, but he seems like a really nice guy, you know. So I mean, I have no animosity toward him personally. Um, all right, so I am going to begin wrapping up the show. If you have any last comments or questions, go ahead and start putting them in the live chat. And I see Geek is putting in the links and such. Thank you very much for that, my friend. Please pay attention to those and consider making use of them. Um, and also, since I'm mentioning Geek putting the links in, don't forget charitylinks.page, which is a whole document full of links that Geek has compiled for us that you can use if you have a few spare bucks lying around to help out some friends of ours who need a helping hand, who need some financial assistance. Charitylinks.page. It is linked in the description of this live stream. Also, don't forget, if you enjoy my work here on YouTube and you would like to support me as I continue to make videos and do shows like this, you can support this channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives or becoming a channel member by clicking the join button on the YouTube page. Channel members and Patreon patrons at any level get to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams. And those are the questions that I answer first thing in the opening portion of the show. So if that's something that seems interesting to you, or if you just want to help me continue making videos, please consider becoming a patron or a member. And thank you all so very much to those of you who have been patrons or members, because I could not do this without you. Also, don't forget that in addition to YouTube stuff, I am on a couple of podcasts that are part of the Lemmy Listen family of podcasts. Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I do alongside Jason Harding, and the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I do alongside Jason and our very own Dana Cole, who is in the live chat. Ensign's Log is on hiatus in between seasons. We have not yet started the new season yet. I'm not exactly sure when that will be, probably sometime in the next few weeks. And also, we have to do our in between seasons Ensign's Log live stream at some point, which we haven't done yet, but we're going to figure that out. And also, Late Seating. There ordinarily would have been a new Late Seating episode this week, but Jason and I have not had a chance to record one because of Jason's incredibly busy work schedule. So our next episode of Late Seating will be recorded at some point soon. And I'm really looking forward to that one because if you listen to the last episode of Late Seating, you know that the movie we're reviewing is Magnolia, one of my favorite movies. So I can't wait to actually review that movie with Jason, but we haven't had a chance to do it yet. But whenever we do, that episode of Late Seating will be up ASAP. So thank you all for listening to Late Seating and to the Ensign's Log. And if you haven't listened to any of them, I recommend them to you, especially Ensign's Log if you're into Star Trek stuff, because I think you'll really enjoy it. So there we go. Let's turn back to the live chat real quick to grab some final thoughts and questions, and then I will wrap this baby up. 255 AD says, no, I mean, is he not a smart enough man to understand the danger abstractly, even if he can't empathize with being? I would go along with that. I can easily believe that Ted Cruz is not a smart enough man to grasp the danger. Yeah, I think that's completely plausible. Blue Beetle, what movie would you remake with Muppets if you had the power? All Quiet on the Western Front. Harry Behemoth, should Tony hire Jim Cornette to book the show from his house? No, I don't think Cornette is the best choice. I listened to Cornette's podcast. I agree with a lot of what Cornette says about wrestling. My ideal version of pro wrestling is probably very much like Jim Cornette's ideal version of pro wrestling, but I don't think he's the right choice to book AEW. For one thing, he's way too dismissive of the women's division. I think the women's division needs to be a priority and needs to be booked so that eventually there can be parity between the men's division and the women's division. And the women's division in AEW right now is a fucking mess. Jim Cornette is definitely not the right guy to bring in to deal with that. And even though I agree with Cornette on a lot of stuff, I do think he is far enough out of touch with the current product and the likes and dislikes and taste of the current audience that I don't think he would necessarily be an asset. So no, I don't think Cornette is the right person for that job, even if he's only doing it remotely. David Colby says, hey, Steve, I hope Lower Decks writers write for the Strange New World crossover. Then the characters will have personalities. Haha, I couldn't help myself. You're banned. You're not really banned. I think you're great. Even though your taste for Star Trek shows in this one instance is extremely suspect. Death match from Kane. Chocolate or vanilla? I got to go with chocolate. Blue Beetle. Your Muppets remake would be Mad Max Fury Road. I can get behind that. Meshugganator, was Charlotte versus Rhea better than Io versus Bianca? I don't think I saw Io versus Bianca, so I can't speak to that. But I thought I assume you mean Charlotte versus Rhea at this year's WrestleMania. I thought that was a fantastic match. 255 80. I mean, look, I don't know if it's a guarantee that Ted Cruz is that dumb. I'm just saying if somebody suggested that he was that dumb, I would completely believe it. All right. I'm calling it a night. Thank you so much to all of you for your awesome questions, for your awesome participation, for your awesome selves, just being here watching all this. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you guys. And I will see you next week when Dana and I are back together for another Trek Reluctantly on Wednesday. And of course, I'll see you for the pre-recorded videos and such. And don't forget, a week from tonight, next Friday, Dana and I are doing another watch-along live stream where we are watching 2 episodes of Batman the Animated Series. We're watching both parts of Robin's Reckoning a week from tonight. So wherever you watch Batman the Animated Series, if you're subscribed to HBO Max or if you have it on DVD or you get it from some other source, be ready to watch both parts of Robin's Reckoning along with Dana and I right here next Friday. And then I'll be back the Friday after that in 2 weeks for another Ask Away. So I'll see you for all of that and a bunch of stuff in between. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.